Shut up, Michael. Michael, shut up. Shut up. Shut up, Michael. Shut up, Michael. No one cares, Michael.
I'll just mute you. I think because I'm the host, I can do all kinds of shit on my end. So watch it, buddy.
I feel like you've been thinking about this before this moment.
I've been dreaming of this moment.
Hello, and welcome to Middleish, the podcast about moderation and all things. I am Michael Gray.
And I am Erin Green.
Hello, Erin Green.
Hello.
How are you?
Good morning. You know what? I'm good, but I'm going to put a little more light in my face.
In your face. She's going to put more light in her face, right inside
Is that better?
of it.
Yeah, right in.
Yeah.
So it's coming
I was
out of
wondering.
my eyes,
I was like,
my
are you
ears.
sick or something?
Yeah, what's going on? You look gray and dark and shadowy. I'm getting my Halloween
Are you dying?
vibe on. Getting the Halloween feel, you know, a little shadowy vibe.
Mysterious.
I actually caved and bought a couple little Halloween-y decorations yesterday. Nothing big, just a little, like there's a little, it's actually more Dia de los Muertos decorations, like there's a little cat figurine that's like painted really colorful, like the little skeleton kind of colorful thing. And then there's like a little votive candle holder. And anyway,
Nice.
I was just like, I just need a little, now that I've accepted that fall is here and it's October and candy corn season, I need to maybe get in the spirit of things and embrace fall. It takes me a little while, but I'm there.
Okay, so you said caved. Do you normally not have Halloween decorations? Is it more just that we're here in this
Yeah,
year?
I'm not big on decorating for every holiday and season. Like some people really get into it. I sort of don't.
You
like,
don't decorate for Arbor Day?
No, I mean, I might like go
National Donut Day? Come on.
take pictures of a tree, or I might go eat a donut, but I don't like decorate my house like, you know, this enchanted forest or something. So anyway, but it is kind of fun. I mean, you know, we have a new house, and so there's a little bit of this nesting kind of compulsion that's going on with me right now. And I think sometimes with fall, I get really sad when summer is on its way out. And so this is a way for me to kind of shift gears from, you know, missing summer and being sad that it's over to looking forward to all the things that I love about fall, like warm soups and fire pits and carving pumpkins and scary movies and candy corn. Did I mention candy corn? Are you pro candy corn or anti? This is an important question.
Is it important that I have strong feelings one way or the other?
It's important that you agree with me. Otherwise, we're going to go down a different path.
Okay. Here's my honest thoughts on candy corn. Okay.
Oh,
I never like want candy corn on my own, but if someone has it out, I'll absolutely eat some. Yeah.
Okay.
I know a lot of people will consider, like, people are like, they're garbage candy. I'm like, yeah, no, they're not. There's a lot of worse candies out there.
Yeah.
Like way worse
Smarties. Smarties are one of the, I just can't, it's like chalk.
My girls both like Smarties, and I don't like, to me as a kid, Smarties were like, oh, it's candy. I mean, I guess it counts, but I'm not excited about this. I'm just going to eat it because I get to eat candy.
Yeah, because they hand them out in your Halloween bag and you're like, God dang it. I ate all the good ones. I ate all the Snickers and Reese's. Now I'm stuck with Smarties and bubble gum.
You know, yeah. Yeah, Smarties aren't the greatest, but candy corn, I'm not anti-candy corn. But I do believe that everyone should have the right to feel however they feel about candy corn, just like pineapple on pizza.
You're allowed to. Okay. Oh, speaking of.
Yes.
Cold pizza. Is that a thumbs up for you?
Yes. Most of the time. I do think it depends on where it's from, because I feel like some companies or whatever, it's just not up to snuff cold. You need to reheat it. But I'm really into pizzas that are good cold, because that's the shit. Good cold pizza. Thank you. Yes, please.
Yes, I agree. I love it. And especially, I mean, if it's just like a day because as you get further along, if it's been like 2 days in the fridge or something, usually the crust gets really tough. And I don't know that it just doesn't taste the same, but I'm a huge cold pizza fan. And I remember, so I brought this up because if any of you listening don't follow Michael on Instagram, he posted about this great recipe for drunken noodles that he made. And then he followed it up with, oh my gosh, they're amazing cold. And I was like, yes, 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 yes. Because I have morphed into somewhere along the lines, enjoying cold leftovers. And I remember my mother used to eat cold leftovers. And I always thought she was just too busy, couldn't be bothered to heat them up. And she just was, kind of miserly that way. And I was like, come on, heat up your whatever hamburger helper. I really have turned into a cold leftover kind of lover. And so I wanted to have this conversation because it seems that you appreciate cold leftovers.
Yep. I'm a big fan of, of course it depends on what it is, I guess. And I don't know that I could tell you like offhand anything in particular. I'm like, I won't eat that cold because I don't know that I know that, but I'm a big fan of the ones that do. Like, I think, like I've had leftover curry cold. That's pretty great. Those drunken noodles were awesome. We have some, I think they're called like firecracker meatballs. We got the recipe from HelloFresh that I love cold leftover. You had this like kind of hot sriracha sauce that you just dip them in and yeah, I'll eat 5 or 6 of those. No problem. Right out of the fridge with the door open. Yeah. I don't even care. I'll stand right in front of it.
Sink or something.
Yeah. Like, just don't care at all. I don't need a plate. I don't need heat. I'm fine.
We all encourage you to be mindful about your eating, though. So.
Oh, it's a conscious choice. It's not mindless. I'm going to do this, and this is going to be real special. I'm going to eat in front of the refrigerator with the door open for like 3 minutes. It's going to be great.
Because you're an adult, and by damn, you can do adult things.
I can do what I want in my own house. Okay.
Do you remember the first time you realized, like, hey, this is my own place. I can do all those things that my parents told me not to do, or that I was just never really allowed to do.
Like, I get to make those decisions. I do remember that because it was my freshman year in college. Right. And we didn't really have like a cooking setup, but we had like a fridge and microwave and stuff, which for a freshman in college is, I got everything I need to cook. I got a microwave. Yeah. These frozen burritos just go right in there for toaster, 2 minutes. And
like, we're good.
Yeah, I'm 100% good. But I remember thinking like, this is really liberating and also kind of terrifying. Like, okay, I'm responsible for a lot now. Like, I can do whatever I want, and I can do whatever I want. This could go really bad.
So let's just tiptoe into this world of responsibility and adulthood.
I've wanted a lot of dumb things in my life, and I can do them now. So,
oh boy. Yeah. Well, speaking of being an adult and doing adult things in our lives, we have a great guest today.
Yes.
And he is an adult, even though he's not on the Zoom call yet. He would probably argue with me if he heard me call him that. He'd be like, wait a minute. Our friend Brian Fretwell is back, so I am going to let him in the meeting, and we'll talk to Brian.
Hey,
that was a groan, if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
That was a great way to come on. It's like, ugh. Here we go. Middleish again.
Like, are we doing an episode on shame? Because maybe that we should.
We can.
Yeah. This is like an episode for any future guest. Like, we just shame me for an hour. This is what happens. I apologize so much.
You're fine, man. No
that's
worries.
Okay. It's life. And we were just on here doing our little intro, and we did like a quick introduction of you, but we're happy to start over if you want to get your feet under you. And start over with our introduction of you.
Oh, I'm good to go. I half the time those are awkward for me to listen to. It's sort of like listening to Jamie watch my TikToks.
You're like grossed out. Like Brene Brown always says she gets grossed out when people watch her do her talks and her, big presentations. Cause she's like, I'm on, like I'm acting and I'm this other persona. And I don't like my family and friends to see that,
Yeah. It may be like one of the best things about TikTok is there's like an anonymity to it. I think that's why I've never been as consistent on a social media platform, but it's because I don't like when people are like, I watch you on TikTok.
Yeah.
You don't know me.
You're like, that's not me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So Brian, we were chatting before you came on about what's your opinion on cold leftovers?
Oh, well, now that's a blanket opinion that has categorical implications, right?
It does. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes. So you can go where you want with that question.
Yeah. Cold leftovers. I reheat most of the time, I guess. If I'm like, if it was originally heated, I'm by and large, like I think of pizza. I don't eat pizza much. But like Jamie's gone to Detroit, so I was like, I'm having a large pizza and 3 beers to myself. I had
then I don't have to share.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you'll reheat those leftovers? Pizza?
I did reheat them. That's what I was processing. I was like, oh wait, okay. I put that in the microwave. I did not super hot, just enough for the cheese to feel soft again. Yeah.
Okay.
Aaron, I feel like we've heard everything we need to.
Yeah, I think this podcast is over.
That's likely a personality assessment that I just did.
Thanks for coming, Brian.
You didn't make this.
Been great.
It's a screener question, so bye now. Good to see you. Yeah.
Maybe we should send these out ahead of time.
So Brian,
what's up?
You were episode 7 for Middleish. And today we are, what are we, Michael?
72, I think.
Oh, yeah. I was hoping for 77. I was like,
oh, dang it. Well, bye now. We'll call you in 5 episodes.
You were late, so we're fair.
Try this again in a month.
I actually listened to that episode this morning just to remind myself what we talked about, and it's actually really good. So those of you who are listening to this and haven't listened to our first interview with Brian Fretwell, episode 7, I highly recommend it because we talked about some really great concepts about goal setting and evoking certain feelings that people want to have. And I mean, just the neuroscience of, behaviors and company culture and all of that space you were working in before. So I really enjoyed re-listening to that episode. It was great.
Great. I'll have to jump back in there. Yeah. But then I have to hear myself.
You have to listen to yourself.
Yeah. It's awkward, but you can get over it. You can do it.
Fair. True.
So tell me a little bit about how maybe where you're at now, because one of the things you told us in that previous episode was that I was trying to find the exact number of months that you had said, but I think you said like within the next 6 to 8 months, you wanted to have a clear direction on what the next move in your career was going to be. And I'm like, whoa, here you are. And that was last July. And so it's been over a year and here you're doing some really cool stuff. So
still figuring it out, but but it's been a bit of an evolution. I think it's, and I was thinking about it on the drive here. It's like how to describe it, but I think since that time, it's really been doing, if you will, like root cause analysis, right? So we were doing the practice sessions and we were focused on kind of 1 or 2 questions, and that evolved into, holy cow, we can actually structure questions to meet different outcomes, whether that was emotional intelligence or mindset. And in my former career, we focused a lot on the leadership or mindset and like those outcomes you're looking for. But as we continued on and started to get into like, wait, where is the change happening? Like, where is the catalyst? Like, or rather, where is the underlying problem that's actually making it so we have to focus on these other things? And long story short, we're hyper focused on everyday conversations now. and that the way we talk to each other, the things that we take for granted, can be the most damaging things in relationship. And that relationship itself is the root support of all of the other things that we're trying to develop. And I think I've found over the last year and a half that it's also the most unrecognized. Like, we have a culture of do it by yourself, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but more and more science is coming out that like we are designed to do this stuff together. We are designed to learn to get internal motivation from each other, right? So, which sounds counterintuitive, like, but self-validation from each other. And it starts in the day-to-day interactions. And then, you know, we can build from there, but it really, I mean, where we got at today is I had a TikTok on Monday that was, we have 30 different ways to ask a better question than how was your day? And you even just look at that, and that's only 2 days old. You look at the comments in there and people are like, I just had my daughter opened up more than she has since we've known each other, you know, which, the kid's whole life. And we've had more and more of those responses and interactions from just simple, well, I say simple, but there's a lot of science behind the change in how you're approaching it. So I think I've dumbed it down enough for myself. That's really what's going on.
Well, you know, I've been loving everything you've been putting out, because it really makes me think, you know, just personally with my kids, with my wife, but also my business, like how do I ask questions to clients, right? And one thing that jumped out at me that I think it was just from a few weeks ago was the gratitude piece, right? Like it was not what are you grateful for, but you said, where today did you feel the most grateful? And it was like, oh, that's just a whole different way, a way to approach that. And what I love that you said that really got me thinking, like in much bigger ways for myself, was if we ask the same question the same way every time, what does that communicate? Like a kind of a lack of interest, you know, like, let me just do the bare minimum. Hey, how was your day? This is the millionth time I've asked you this question. And I'm not going to get anything worthwhile back. It was fine. Or I'm just tired.
And the crazy, and what I found is like people will start like, how was your day? And then they'll start working in that question, which is, it's really interesting. Like a parent, you know, why won't you look up from your phone? Well, you've asked me how was your day every damn day since I was 5, right?
That's a boring
and now
question.
they're putting more work into the tool that's already shown it's like, you know, overcome its usefulness, if you will, right? And so just like a little change, like that initial message it sends to the other person is like, oh, this person's taking a little more time, right, to actually be interested. And that being interested starts to be aligned with feeling valued. And that's the more we discover that's what our brain is looking for. Am I valued in the pack? And that's a two-way street, right? So even the person asking, and that's again another thing we've discovered is I need to ask things I'm actually interested in. What I challenge people in is like, unless you're taking a test on like what happened all day for Aaron, how many clients, like, oh, you know, I'm not like Aaron and I aren't going to have a conversation like, oh, I better remember she had 4 clients, not 5 for the test later.
Right.
If that like, you know, so the content is less important than the context.
Sure.
Like, so the content is what happened, right? But the context is what was important to you that happened. What was your opinion? Because I am super interested in your opinion. I'm super interested in like, why was this the best? Because now it opens up discovery.
Right.
And when we sort of launched One Meaningful Question, the definition of meaningful was meaningful to both people that had purpose, interest, and value. Like the question has to have purpose, interest, and value to both people, not just one.
Okay.
I like that.
So before we dive into One Meaningful Question, because we are going to get there and I want to hear all about it. I want our listeners to hear about it because I think this is a really important topic and maybe exploration right now. I'm thinking of just when we started this conversation back, whatever, last July, and you were sort of investigating like, what direction am I going to go with my business and what I do and what I have to offer the world and how I want to, influence people. You were starting to ask the question, what went well?
Yeah.
What went well? And I feel like when I reflect back on that, I thought that was it still is a fantastic question. It's a very simple question. And I want to hear if that sort of planted the seed for developing more of these questions and how that also, I guess, maybe backing up a little further, how did you see the need for this? Because you talk about like social belonging, and I mean, that's been, at the core of a lot of what you do and what you've studied and, been an expert in for so long. Did you see that like the pandemic and the sign of the times and all of this had this sort of social disconnect and we need to reconnect in a meaningful way? So I'm just curious, like back up to kind of the beginning of this.
So the what went well question started almost 10 years ago with myself, Kibby. Well, Kibby and I were likely the first to do it, where I had before that always been like, okay, I need to meet with friends to do goal setting. And I hate the word accountability in as much as like, I don't want anybody to hold me accountable. Like, and for me, because what that means in my head is like, nobody's going to say worse things about, like, nobody's going to remind me of stuff I'm not already reminding myself of, specifically the things I didn't do. And when we're doing goal setting, where we're doing holding each other accountable, so often the only thing we're holding each other accountable is to the stuff we didn't do, right? Mm-hmm. And so Kibby and I were like, and so Kibby was a client for a bit, and then it got where it's like, you're too much of a friend. Like, we can do this, but I'm not gonna, bill you, even though he bills me for photography. We should talk anyway.
And for those of you, just to real quick, for those of you who haven't listened to episode 7 and don't know, Kibby is a mutual friend that Brian and I have. That's the connection that Brian and I met through Kibby, who is a longtime friend of me and Matt. So that's the connection there.
So we started meeting and having some other people join basically on a phone call. And I had the phone call this morning, by the way, because we moved it to Wednesday morning. And for over 5 years, every week we get on and say, what went well? And over time we added because of you. And it was in the last week. And that actually creates the design that we have today. But what what got me interested was actually like a little less about the disconnection of the pandemic. Like, it was more that we had used this simple structure, we have a 1 hour call every week. You can each person gets 15 minutes to talk about what went well the prior week. Everybody else's job is to simply maybe ask a question or maybe reflect, right? But you're not giving advice, you're not giving, that sort of things. And we check each other when that happens, because you kind of rarely do. But the question I had was, why is this working? Because two of the folks, of the folks that were on the call, there's been a few, well, John is very open about, he went through rehab, came back, and rarely misses this call. And we talk openly, like 4 dudes that aren't like super touchy-feely, that tell each other we love each other after the call, because this is the place that we get to share what I've come to find is the hardest thing to share. The things that are going well because of our input. It's much easier to share the things that aren't going well because of our input, or the things that aren't going well that we have nothing to do with, right? But the hardest thing to share with somebody, the scariest thing to share is, here's the impact I'm having on the world. And here's the impact I want to have on the world. I mean, even talking about it, you get kind of... And so when the pandemic happened, it was just like, okay, I'm going to open this up. I don't know why it's working. I don't know if it's just working because, this 4 group of people, and I'm going to have this other call, and just people kept sending stuff back. Like, this is changing how I'm looking at this. This is changing how I'm looking at this. And there was a bit like when I start like, oh, this will be a good way to connect to people. But what really got us diving in was me spending so many years in, the professional development space and seeing people make progress that they were proud of without without me doing anything more than like, here's a question, go talk to this stranger from across the world for 10 minutes and you can only ask questions, and just seeing them like excel. And then, you know, that was in the time that I talked to you all last. And then from there, it was like, okay, let's build some science behind, like, let's figure out and deconstruct why it's happening and where it starts and how we can replicate it. And from there, then what outcomes we can expect. Yeah.
So I have a quick question. Why do you think, and maybe you don't have the answer to this, why do you think it's so scary for people to share what's going well because of them?
Because it puts you at risk, right? So we've been taught to be humble, right? Which is fine, and that we're and it's easier. There's a comfort in like, oh, I screwed this up, right? And then somebody
it's self-deprecating,
yeah. And I've been chastised. I've lost jobs as a facilitator from being so self-deprecating. And it's always been my way of connecting with people. It's a really good tool when I'm like in a mining camp and I'm like, yeah, they brought this goofy dude that doesn't know anything, never been in your job, to tell you what to do. And they laugh and I can create that connection. But the challenge of saying what you do out loud requires a level of trust, like that what you do well, that you have an impact on, because you like, think about how many things you're putting out there for somebody that they could take advantage of. Here's what I care about. Here's what I think I'm doing well, right? Like the level of trust, right? The level of that psychological safety needed. Like, think about how many people we legitimately trust to share those things in our lives, and it's very few.
Well, right? And if they disagree and tell you, no, actually, you're not doing that very well, or you kind of suck at that, that's like, I mean, the deepest and most meaningful thing that you think you're imparting on the world. Somebody challenges that and tells you you're not making a difference. That doesn't feel good. Like that, you know, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Or even that's not a place to push into or worthwhile feeling good about. Maybe there's more noble things for you to do. It's a scary place.
What we do reach out to people is like, hey, what should I do? What do you think I should do in my job? Right? Because we're in trusting friends that we support. But now every time, if somebody you're going to be hard pressed to get me to answer that for somebody, because what we've discovered in here is when somebody comes to me and says, what do you think I should do? And I start giving them answers, I start cutting their agency down. I start chipping away at their belief that they know, that they're confident, so flipping that question on its head and connecting to Michael, the one you just talked about, like, instead of what are you grateful for, where have you felt grateful? Instead of what do you want to do, where have you felt most alive? Where have you felt super engaged? Or where have you felt the most engaged? That actual little change is super important. Because if I say, where have you felt engaged? The likelihood of them saying, never, right? But the most engaged allows me to say, well, you know, I wasn't super engaged, but I was more engaged in this than the other. And that prioritization system is what we're trying to develop, right? Yeah. So where have you felt the most alive at a job or at something that somebody looks like at a job? And that's how we use each other to start building that self-confidence, that internal belief, and clarifying those things. Because how many people have you met that they say, I have no idea what I want to do.
Right.
I have no idea what I'm good at. I don't know what value I bring to whatever. We learn that from each other. And I think we've gotten away from, you know, helping people figure that out for themselves and that's seeing our part in helping that. Go ahead.
Yeah. That's what stood out to me about that question, was not the way it was all phrased, but that it was where, not what. Yeah. Because we tend to focus on what, right? Like that's the nature of small talk. Give me some facts. What do you do? Where were you born? How many siblings do you have? Let me get some information that doesn't matter at all to who you are, probably. Yeah. But that where, it's like, now we're talking about experience. You know, like where's what experiences do you feel grateful for? What experiences make you feel alive? And that's just such a shift. That's, I think, really important to ask, because that's what matters, because you can find those experiences in maybe a variety of places. You know, what do I love? Well, I think I love personal training, but that doesn't mean I only love this. There's something root about that I could probably do in a lot of ways.
And one of the cool things, and this is like, we're trying to figure out how to communicate this, but like we have this membership that is a community, and I fervently believe, and I'm going to share you an example of exactly how this works. But like I'm driving the ship for sure in like this research, but our community has done more for us pushing forward. Like, hey, where do we apply it? How do we do these, ask better questions? Like they're pushing if you will, I want to call it research, but it's not quite research yet. It's really just discovery and exploration. But that question you have of like, where was I grateful in the past? Because I get to watch these conversations. It's some brilliant questions that I've heard but how does gratitude actually feel for you?
Oh, geez.
Like, do you feel it in your body? Like, how do you describe that feeling? Because somebody will be sharing like, oh, I felt really grateful when my kids were going. And well, what was the feeling? Oh, it was warm. What does it say about you that feeling happened naturally? What does it say about you as a parent? What do you want it to say? People I call them the little ninjas. Like they get so good at these questions. I was a participant Friday because I try to jump in and be a participant. And this it's not at all, I don't want to scare people off, in the practice, but it was just a question about like, where did you have an impact in the week? And I was sharing like, oh, I'm training my dogs, which is what I was doing this morning, but I was training my dogs, and how I love it because how I love how my wife lights up when we controlled these little terrorists, right? But somebody on the call dropped this question: what does it mean that you like that? And I'm like supposed to be running this thing, and I'm like literally like shed a tear, like, man, that was such a beautiful question, because it stopped me and said, man, that's one of the best experiences, and I didn't even think about it. I wasn't even making that connection, and this person just saw it, tossed the question, and I've been thinking about it all week, right? Yeah. So it's the cool thing is the community is these practitioners, that it's not like you reach this level or there's some guru. We're all working to create this, if you will. Yeah.
So you've mentioned this community and these conversations and these calls, and we had thrown out one meaningful question and this new endeavor that you're on, but it sounds a little nebulous. Like, okay, what's this thing? Like, what is it? Can you give a little bit of maybe the concrete structure of what you're doing and who it's for and how people can dip their toes into this? Because getting into that deeper space, I think we all want it on some level.
Yeah.
But like you said, it feels scary and it feels vulnerable, and there's a lot of trust. So can you give us a little bit more like concrete? This is what it is. These are, this is how it's set up. And this is how maybe people could start.
Yeah. So we really kind of break it down into three, so if we think about a question, we start from that, and I think where most people get initially interested is, give me a list of better questions than what was what was the best thing that happened to you today? So we call that kind of the tools where it's explicit. And so on one meaningful question we'll upload those 30 questions, but we also have 3 different areas: conversations with teenagers, so for parents, partners, so couples, and then peers, so friends and coworkers. 3 categories. And then we have questions. Here's a list of questions and situations that you can use a question to validate the other person. And then the deeper ones, we call that meaningful validation. Then we have 5 in each category. We have 5 what we call meaningful connections, which are a sequence of 4 or 5 questions that you can ask like at a dinner table. And those are all designed to build trust and resilience in what might be a tougher conversation later. So with teens, we have surviving school. What are you most proud of doing at school? What did you have to work a little harder on? What strength did you develop? And these are all conversations before you get to the report card, right? So if you have these weekly, you're helping the kid be able to share the good things so that they don't have to hide the bad things in the future, right? And the partner one, which we finally finished the partner one last week, but meaningful validation is if you see they're going through something tough, we would have a question in there like, hey, what hill are you overcoming right now? Or how are you getting over the challenge right now? Because the context is like, tell me about the effort you're putting in. And you can share with me the challenge if you'd like, but I'm curious about the effort, right? Instead of like, oh, looks like you had a tough day. It's like, woo, tell me what monster, how you're battling the monster today. And again, we're focusing that on that. But in the partners, it also has, again, meaningful conversations, which the one I'm super excited about is money. If you've been in a relationship for 10 minutes, you've had a bad conversation about money. And so we have a design conversation every week. What's the best financial decision you think you made this week? What does that say about the values you hold dear? What strength do you think you utilized in that decision? How does that decision benefit our relationship? And then how can we use more of what you've discovered to meet some of the things we want to do in the future? And those are very explicit design conversations. And then from there we get into, because people will practice that and be like, that's harder than it sounds. What's behind here? And so that's where we get into like resources, where we do this in the membership. There's going to be 2 levels of membership where we're just basically, here's an outline of a question. Here's the science behind it. Here's why you would ask it. Here's some structure of how you would ask it and the follow-ups. And then on the back, here's sort of best practices. So when somebody moves from explicit then to like, okay, I need to understand a little bit more than what's behind here, that's sort of like we're building resources in that. And then the third is the practice sessions that we talk about, because, and I think that's where the gold is. We're designing it to people can do the practice on their own. That's on that. But then if you want to join we do a weekly call, and there's 4 or 5 of them, you can join any time of the week, but you get on there, each person has 10 minutes where the other 2 people can only ask the question or ask them questions.
That's so hard. 10 minutes.
Oh man, it's so great.
It's so hard.
So great. Well, if you're the person asking the question, the 10 minutes goes by like that. If you're the person answering, it's like, what happened? Right? Wow. There's so much discovery that happens. So what we do is we have an outline. Here's the question. Here's the science behind it. So they're paired. Here's some other questions you might consider, because we have structures in there. But then they, just go. And I think one of the ones this week is, last week, tell me how you utilize the strength. In the last week, tell me how you utilize the strength to make somebody's life better. Right? So I would toss that to Michael. And then for 10 minutes, Aaron, you and I are looking for, and this was the nature, this is what we initially called it. We're looking for the fire. We're kind of in a competition, not necessarily with each other, but for what kind of questions can we ask Michael that's actually going to make him see himself? That's going to light the fire a little bit. Like that's going to have him maybe have an insight, or we're not leading him. Like, because if you lead, you'll never have that experience. But we're practicing being what we call positively curious about, where did that come? Why did you do that? What's important about that? What does that say about you?
Yeah.
Those kind of questions.
Do you think it's easier to do this with strangers?
Yes.
Versus somebody,
we have multiple spouses on. And there's a couple that like they've gotten to where they love even practicing with each other, but like, and we encourage, even if you're not practicing with us, if you're just one of those that utilize the resource on your own, and even on the teens and all those resources, we say explicitly, try this on with somebody that doesn't have a vested interest in it at first. Because again, we have so many habitual ways of talking especially about that scary stuff, money, challenges, or noticing each other, that like that fight or flight system is kicked on. And it takes a while. And Jamie and I practicing this, I've noticed like, oh, wow, we just went into like defending our positions, didn't we? Like, and Jamie's a counselor. So like, we're doing that. But yes, that's been the coolest thing about this, the community and the practice sessions is people are like, oh, I got this place where I can say what I want and it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? And the beauty is that teaches the other people that are asking the question, they don't have a vested interest in leading somebody in giving them the answer and coming up with the solution, even though when you're new, you always fight all of those things because it's habitual. But when you get into the practice of asking what we call an authentic question, that I'm just curious about this because I wonder if you make this connection, or I wonder if I'm even right about that connection. You practice out with strangers so you can, and we call it going out to the game, because when you're with your family, when you're with your friends, when you're with them in the places that matter, that psychological stress makes it harder to stay in that curious space. But once you start changing that feedback mechanism, because you've been on the calls and you get that really good feeling of having a question that like helps somebody, then you realize that's the same feeling I'm looking for when I'm trying to share my story, when I'm trying to be heard in a conversation. It's the same value I'm trying to get when I'm giving somebody the answer or sharing with them a solution, and I can get it in a much more powerful way with a handful of questions. That's for a lot of us. It's certainly for me as a talker, obviously, changed a lot of the ways I talk to people one-on-one for sure. Yeah. Apparently not on a podcast. I just keep talking. Anyway.
Well, what I love about that is, I think, with your kids or with a spouse or whatever, I think when you have those harder, challenging conversations, you often bring in past conversations and assumptions about what they're going to say about you, or, that kind of stuff. And so I love the idea of practicing that with other people who don't have that vested interest, because my guess is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it would be a lot easier to really gain some understanding about yourself, about what motivates me to respond in these ways, to highlight certain things, to ask these certain questions. And then you can take that understanding of this is what's behind the ways I navigate conversations and go into those really important ones with a better understanding of what motivates me and what am I trying to get out of this? What's important to me? How do I connect with someone else who sees this differently? Yeah. But that just feels brilliant, man.
Yeah, well, and I tell people all the time, I'm teaching people to be better at being selfish. And what I mean by that is your brain is designed to get almost 10 times the effect, the positive affect in receiving than you do giving. You get so much more out of receiving, or it's backwards, so much more out of giving than receiving, right? Like when you give something, we include quite a few of these articles in some of the outlines that we do. But what we're doing is showing a way for someone to give a really good experience to somebody much more efficiently and effectively. And what's cool is so some of the folks on the team, Mandy, who's of our sales and marketing, she came back one day and she was like, she has a son, 17 or so. And I just had a conversation with him about, some personal thing with likely a girl or something. And she was like, I was so worried about that conversation. I just asked these questions and he opened up to me and he shared this. And she said, and then about a half hour later, he said, thank you. And
wow.
But I've been told that that's a pretty important thing. And she comes back later and has talked about like how they've been able to have a more open dialogue. And what's happening is that we know we're going to have that tough conversation. The problem with that is that we're going to experience social pain. And I've taught for years in leadership that like, as a leader, you have to think about a 10-to-1 ratio social reward to social pain. You are going to cause social pain, rejection, right? Them not feeling valued, not feeling whatever. You're going to fly off the handle likely sometimes. That's going to happen. But for you to maintain equilibrium, and equilibrium is important because once this is out of balance, then when you're interacting with the person, you're interacting with their fight or flight system, not their full. So if we have equilibrium, at least we can start doing the interaction. So the question becomes like, how do I build that, right, positive reward, that social reward? And this is what we're finding behind the design in the question, what we call a positive assumption, focus on agency, and timing with validation, is we are purposefully, and I would argue measurably now, being able to say, holy cow, I know I can have 4 or 5 conversations in a week with my kid that's going to be positive. They may be awkward. They might not go super well, but the message, the unconscious message I'm saying is, I'm interested in the good pieces of you. So that when we get to the part where this thing that you're doing needs to stop, we have built the structure to support that conversation. Yeah. That we're not just, and how many kids have you heard say, you only talk to me when I'm screwing up? The reason they say that is because for one conversation about where you're screwing up is equivalent to 10 of where you're doing well. Like literally your brain is going to remember that at a much higher rate. So over time, it can feel like the only thing I hear is where I'm screwing up. So if I'm a parent, if I'm a spouse, if I'm even a friend, I want to be really conscious about, how am I getting opportunities for this person to feel like they're a valuable part of my pack, right?
Well, and as a parent, I completely see that, because, the times when we've been like having just really good conversations and interactions and moments with Lila, our oldest in particular, because Sophie's 5, so we don't have as many of those yet. But when we do have to have some sort of correction or harder conversation, when we have that connection, through good conversations and places that help build trust, it goes way better. When if it's, the 6th conversation in a week about like, what is going on, that kind of thing. Oh yeah. It's an explosion and it doesn't go anywhere and nothing gets accomplished. Yeah. So I completely see what you're saying, man.
Yeah. And when I get into the really nerdy, I spent a fair amount of time, the pandemic, what I read during the pandemic, but that there is a lot of like anthropologically, we are designed this way. Like there was a really cool study about like how much hunters and gatherers, how much productive work time they actually had per week. And it was 16 to 20 hours. So what that tells you though, is like for them to be successful hunting or gathering, which the majority of their food or nutrition actually came from the gathering piece. That's just, right. That's for the females out there, you were the more valuable part of the pack. But right. But to be effective in that, you think about where they spent the majority of their time at the campfire, in the cave, or whatever the case might be. Learning, it's much more. And if you've been hunting before or on a team, I want to know what that other person does really, really well. And it's super valuable for them to know what I do really, really well, because the more we know about what we do well, the more effective we're going to be. There's not a ton of value of being experts at this is what you do wrong. This is what you do wrong. And I think the first viral TikTok I had was a story about sitting with a counselor, and he asked me like, hey, in 60 seconds, do you think you get your wife upset? And I was like, what do you think I need 60 seconds for? I'm like 4 words away from her throwing a chair out the window. Watch this, And then he sits back and he asks her the same, but he sits back and he looks at each other and he goes, okay, but if the other person's having a rough day and they're struggling, do you know enough about what they need, what they love to bring, like how many minutes is it going to take you to effectively bring them back? If you can drive them into anger, how long does it take you to drive them into happiness, if you will? And you don't control either one. But if you can say like, I can piss them off really quick, why wouldn't you want to say, I can make this person so damn happy so quickly. The only way you get there is by constantly focused. Like that has to be super purposeful, you know, like you have to be. And for me, it changed my whole like idea of relationship that now, I get to be a student of this person. And that's what we're really discovering in these questions, because that's like today or this week, and why we say the most of the best, because one of the questions I love with my wife is, what is the best thing that happened to you today? Yeah. And some days it's like, I had this great experience with a client. And some days it's, I didn't stab anybody, right? And I wanted to stab all the people. She doesn't say that. I meant kind of, but in that, like what she's expressing is like, the best thing that happened to me is I got through it. Where that opens up, but like now I'm like, oh, that's where we're at. Okay, let's talk about that.
Right? I think this is so like, man,
I lay down after that.
I know I have so many questions and thoughts on this, but I mean, one thing we know, and of course, Michael and I work in the like wellness space. And so we know about the 6 or 7, depending on the model, the 6 or 7, facets of wellness. And one of the biggies is social. And what a lot of the research is showing us is that longevity is tied to social belonging. Physical health is tied to social belonging. There's, financial health is tied to social belonging. And so it almost seems like that social belonging is kind of at the crux, or at least has a profound influence on all of the different aspects.
Yes. And there's 3 kind of critical pieces. You hit the first one, that social belonging. Like we're showing people like the value you're looking for, which makes you want to talk, makes you want to answer, makes you want to solve people's problems, is I have value in the pack. And you can do that with questions in a more effective way. I absolutely believe that now, right? And so that's that bit of like, I can get this social belonging piece. But in the design, when we're focusing on the positive, when we're focusing on the agency, we build locus of control, which does a lot, all of the things you just talked about, like health, physical, right? All of that, all of those benefits. That belonging bit gets those benefits because if you've read Vivek Murthy's book Together, and if you haven't, get it today, but he talks about loneliness. Vivek Murthy is the current Surgeon General, and he wrote a book about loneliness. Is the biggest epidemic in this country, carte blanche. Yeah. And he wrote this before the pandemic, right? And super good research. So we're making it about truly being heard and connected. That's over that loneliness. And then the other piece is about helping this person feel like they have value or agency, right? I know what to do. I know what I'm good at. And so the combination of those 2 plus curiosity, and what scientists call epistemic curiosity. So it's curiosity that builds curiosity, is very tied to internal motivation, is very tied to self-validation. And what we're doing in these questions is kind of trying to hit all 3. And that's even before we get into the FIRES model, which dictates the kind of categories that we create the questions. This growth mindset, locus of control, emotional intelligence, purpose, and strengths, right? So all of our questions arise from one of those 5 categories, and then they have the meaningful question structure, and then off to the races. So that's the genius of people making it awesome. Starts to just surprise me every day. Yeah.
I love this because I think your model, every conversation I've had with you has some kind of neurobiology, psychology, component, which I love because I'm fascinated with that kind of stuff. And I feel like I have this saying, especially when talking in diet and fitness world, remain skeptical, but curious, always, don't take something at like face value. Like this is the end all be all of it. Remain curious and also a little bit skeptical on like the first time you hear anything like, oh, that's really cool. I want to learn more. I want to know more. Mm-hmm. So I love that curiosity piece that you said. And I'm also curious if you think people can do this on their own. We might have some listeners out there that are like, I don't have a friend group that I can start this with. My spouse certainly is going to look at me sideways if I ask her, what's the best strength that you leverage today or something, you know?
What's your angle? Why are you asking me that?
Yeah. They're going to be like, okay, you want to buy that new bicycle? Like, what's your deal? So I'm curious if you think people can practice this in some way on their own. I know that you offer groups that are full of strangers that people can do this with. Is there a way people can do this, or at least start dipping their toes in on their own?
Yeah. And so it's one of the things that we've restructured a bit, that we know there are going to be a lot of people that may not be comfortable going to the groups and or timing, whatever the case might be. And so it can, but there's a few things that make it easier. And one is, and I think Michael just said, it's like, what do you ask? Like, don't surprise them with the question. So we can look at this as practice. And I really encourage people, like, so when we're thinking about like the different ways to say, you know, how was your day? If you're going to use, and we're going to come out with the 30 in there, and, you know, some of the really cool ones are, you know, what was the most exciting thing that happened to you today? Or you know, anyway, what surprise, whatever the question might be. And the one I shared yesterday, which I love, ask your partner, what is the best thing you did for yourself today? Ask them that. But maybe in the morning say, hey, when we get back from work, from all the things we're doing, and then we put the kids to bed or whatever thing, at 7:00, can we spend 15 minutes and just, I'm going to give you 7 minutes. I'm going to give you the time is like, try to stay under like a half hour, at least initially. And then your brain is primed, like, okay, I'm ready. They're ready. And you're just going to explore it. Right. And I really recommend that if you're doing with a spouse or a non-stranger, but even a stranger, like, what my hope is because we can have people download this, and a lot of the downloads are free. It's just in a coffee shop. You can go in and hit the code and download it on your phone and just sit and have a conversation. But again, I tell people, like, when they go into practice sessions, everybody knows what's going on and they know the rules. And that's what creates the comfort and the safety. So don't surprise people with the question, right? Like, bring them in, let them be a part of it. Let them know you're learning, right? That I don't know, I'm not sure I can do this, right? And then they get to be a part of it with you. And again, that's what makes it meaningful. What happens is, if I bring this question without warning the person, with this expectation that it's going to do this good thing, it's only meaningful to me, and it's likely threatening to them. Yeah. And so being able to, like, and the cool thing with a spouse or your kids is it becomes practice again. And it's discovered, and every time you learn something, I'm just thinking about like how I've applied this with Jamie, and I can just think about these walks where she shares something with me and I'm like, holy shit, we've been together for 20 years. And that's just a beautiful part of you I didn't know about. Right. Or an expression of this part of you that I did know about that just came out in this, you don't forget it. It's just, it's really, sorry, I get all fired up about it, but my dad is 72 years old, and we went hunting 2 weeks ago. Tell me about these questions. Former Marine, by the way, used to work as in a mining operation. He drove truck for 30 years of his life, right? So he doesn't, he has 5 words a day, and, but a couple of them are cuss words. But tell me about this questions thing. And I was like, well, mom comes home and wants to share her day, and she's, talks. And I'm like, well, what if you asked her what the best part of her day was? Would you be interested in that? Well, that's a great question. He's like literally writing it down. And they've been married 40 years or whatever the case might be. And it's that, so it's that little shift of, if I'm interested, then I provide a platform for both of us. And it's simple shifts that allow it. So yeah, I absolutely think people can practice. But again, set the expectations, bring the other person in, set that, like, hey, I don't know if this is going to work, right? And then you can just explore and practice and have fun. Yeah.
Well, what I love about these questions is, I totally see that need to set the stage in such situations, but it just seems like the way you word these, they're very disarming because they show that care. Like, okay, it, like you said earlier, it matters to me to go below the small talk. How was your day? How'd you sleep? Whatever. Let me ask something that connects a little bit deeper and provides you or gives you information of, I care about this.
Mm-hmm.
I want more than just the fine answer, and provides that space to do that. And it seems like it's so disarming.
Our brain is making that calculation in a nanosecond.
Right.
Like we hear from somebody and now we're saying they don't really care. Oh, they're just doing this for whatever, right? But we can feel, like we experience the assumption that the person brings to the conversation. And so what we say is like this positive assumption. What's happening is we're setting a positive expectation. If I ask you, right, what's the best thing you did to take care of yourself today? What message have I already sent? You're worth doing stuff to take care of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I do really good work of not judging your answer, if what you share is, I didn't drink 5 beers, I only drank 4. And I'm like, cool. Yeah, tell me about that. If I stay curious in there, then I'm allowing that person to feel like, oh, I don't have to perform here.
Yeah.
Right? I can actually, and that's where that trust and that safety is built. And that's the hard thing to practice, especially with somebody you love, right? I had 4 beers and not 5.
Right.
You're like,
like,
what
what
the hell? I already
hell?
told you about this 8 times. You know what I mean? Like you want to get into fixing. And it's like, there's a time for fixing, but fixing is a lot easier when you know the parts that aren't broke. And the thing is, like most of us don't, this actually gets a little emotional for me because this is what like I get into on the calls. It's like, how much of my own life I spent not owning the parts of myself that were good. And I see that weekly with these people, like that they get to discover that. And it's funny. I told my wife this week, I was like, I usually dread my birthdays. Like it's this existential angst of where I'm not at in my life. And I told her this week, I was like, I'm really looking forward to my birthday this year. Because I feel like the stuff we're doing, is some of that stuff of like, boy, this is how you make a good life. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so great. And I love, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think everybody listening to this could probably relate on some level. It may not be with their career path. It might be with how they're, connecting with friends. It may be how they're leaving an impact on their household, with their kids and their spouse. It might even be like living up to the kind of person, doing the kinds of things that they want to be, that kind of person. And I tend to look at this as stuff that you can recognize in yourself as well, without having somebody ask you these questions. I mean, I would love for somebody, I have a good friend, my friend Sarah will go hiking or go for a bike ride, and she was a psychology major. And so we have these kinds of questions and deep conversations, and we know that we can just go there anytime and be like, hey, I've got kind of a question for you, and we'll just dig in. And I love that. And so there have been times when I'm like, man, I crave that. Like, I wish somebody would ask me these questions. I might just ask those things of myself, whether that's journaling, whether that's, just kind of putting the devices away and just sitting with your thoughts for a little bit, or getting in touch with nature, kind of moving my body, going for a walk, going for a ride, and just kind of letting my brain sort of process this stuff. I think that people can do this and can learn to be curious with themselves.
Yeah. I always forget his name, but the father of positive psychology. And I didn't find this out until we have a fantastic professor, Kimberly. I'm lost her last name just right off the top of my head, who's been like literally donating time, help bring her genius into this and like pushing. But she was like, oh yeah, the father of positive psychology. And I'm apparently bad with names today, but anyway, he was looking at this idea of gratitude journals that we've all talked about, right? And what she shared me this story. I need to go and really detail it out, but But he found that gratitude journals weren't that effective, because when you're asking what you're grateful for, there's some sort of like, I'm supposed to answer this way. This is what I'm supposed to like. I'm grateful for my wife, even though we just spent the last 4 hours arguing about what damn couch we're going to buy, right? But I know I'm supposed to say grateful. So it's like, it's kind of guilt driven.
Yeah.
And he changed that to what went well. I didn't know this. We did this for years and years. I never even knew. So, but what happens is I get to now define that. What went well is whatever the hell I want it to be, not what I think it's supposed to be. And what you're talking about with these questions, and that's, I think, what I'm discovering, what we're discovering. And again, it's members that come in and say, here's how I'm applying this. And I'm like, holy shit, you're smarter than I am. But like, one of the things they talk about is like, they take that question and journal with it in the morning. And that you talk about that what went well question, right? At the end of the day, and grab your journal. What went well because of me today? Right.
Martin Seligman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that his
there
name?
it is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Father of positive psychology. That is him.
Yeah.
So what I'm taking away from this, Brian, is that I think within myself and like with my kids and my relationships, that my time is better spent not focused on fixing, but focused on growth. Right? Like, where are the places that you can lean into that are going well, and you can foster those strengths and be proud of them and own them and adopt them and grow them, rather than let's fix what's wrong. That's my takeaway from this conversation. And that's going to be some stuff for me to chew on for quite a while. So thank you for that. I really like that.
And the little bit I'll add on that is because how we designed the question in the last week, today, and they're all what happened. Right? Well, every challenge you're ever going to face, your ability to overcome that challenge is directly tied to the clarity you have on the challenges, how you've overcome challenges before, right? Every challenge you're going to face, where have you done this before? Where have you been successful at this before? That's what we're asking in so many different ways. And that's where that self confidence, that motivation comes. It's like constantly having somebody say, look what you did already. Look how you've done. And more importantly, I'm not saying, look how you've done. I'm saying, tell me what you did.
Yeah.
And now the more you say it out loud, the more you start to believe it.
Yeah.
And that's where that growth is.
I love it. And that's something we talk about on here all the time with working with clients and trying to help people kind of, build themselves up a little bit, instead of, it's so easy to look at all the things you're doing wrong and all the goals you didn't hit and all the things you said you were going to do and you didn't, so that's great. I love this. Yeah. So people can find out more at onemeaningfulquestion.com.
Yep. Yeah. And then peoplestrength.com is where you access where you can get in the membership. And again, we're kind of in a beta launch. We sort of, we stuck our head in the sand, if you will, or rather just went to build the back end of all of this stuff. And so now we're testing that stuff out there, but it's a fun place to be. It's
exciting. And we'll link your social media handles and all that in the show notes. And since Michael had some really profound questions for you at our last interview, I don't know if you remember them, but I pulled up a couple really deep questions just to see if we can,
I tried to forget about this.
Would you rather have the ability to see 10 minutes into the future or 150 years into the future?
150 years.
Yeah. Without hesitation.
Yeah.
Well, I think I would say that too.
If you can see 150, you can see 10. Right?
Oh, fair. Yeah. Unless it's like you just
only
jump to that piece of time, so you don't know.
Well, if I jump to that piece of time, I'm getting on the computer and finding it, like downloading the Wikipedia of what happened.
I think
the history of the last 150 years.
I'm just getting Super Bowl wins of the last 150
exactly,
years.
Man. You're doing Back to the Future.
Yeah.
You're getting rich, man.
Yeah, for me, it's like, I'm going to go and I'm going to be very fun. Like some people are going to be like, what's in the cars and stuff. And I'm like, no. Who won this? Nope. Who won the World Series? I
Give
want
stuff
to list
I can bet on
over the next 10 years. And then I'm just like the rest of my life, I'm just playing, doing what I'm, because I'm hello, Mr. Fretwell, you're back in Las Vegas for the World Series. Wow, you've been really good at this. I wonder why.
No, yeah. Because it was that would you rather question. Okay, I have another one. Would you rather be an extra on an Oscar-winning movie or the lead in a box office bomb?
Oh, the lead. Yeah. For sure. Yeah, that's all ego. I'm a lead. Yeah. If the ship's gonna go down, I'll be the captain. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, I love it. Okay, but yeah, I mean, if you're gonna go 100%, there you go.
Blaze of glory, right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, and for the deepest one, would you rather swim in a pool full of Nutella or a pool full of maple syrup?
Oh, maple syrup. Oh man.
I think you could swim in that better than
maple
Nutella.
Syrup is
you could swim in Nutella.
Yeah. I swim
Nutella
in
feels like you might
I'm
die
happy.
in it.
I'm happy drowning in maple syrup. I mean, we're gonna have to go somewhere. And like this, the last breath is your sweetest breath. Do you see what I did there?
I was gonna say it's a sweet way to go.
All right. Oh man. Ooh, my. We're ending on a high note.
We're so punny. Yeah. Ending with dad jokes. That's what we're doing.
That's right.
Lovely. Good job.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. So the last thing we always do is meaning in the mundane.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't prepared anything, we'll give you, Michael and I can go first and we can give you a couple minutes to think about that.
Yeah. I'd love to watch.
Michael, do you want me to go or do you want to go?
You can go. I can go. Whatever. Go ahead.
So mine, I couldn't pick a single instance, but I had these three moments where I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this. This should be my meaning in the mundane. Like this is the really meaningful, little occurrence to me. But I had a few of them and I was like, I don't want to go through all three, but they all were on the bike. And I know, people who listen to this and you both know that the bike is, an important part of my life and cycling and, racing, but they were three very distinct moments where one was doing a commute to a different part of town where I used to work. So it was like my old work commute on the bike for 10 years. So riding that path, which I haven't done in a couple of years, I was like, oh man, it was bringing back all the memories and it's fall. And so that's when I would start bike commuting again when, training season was over. And then I did a gravel event this weekend where I really just let go of any kind of expectation to do it a certain way. I stopped and had a beer at Bogus, at like mile 50. I just had a really great time with it. And it was more of like a connection and just enjoying a beautiful Idaho day. And then I had a bike ride with Matt this weekend where we went to brunch at Bound Crossing. And then we just kind of like tootled along the greenbelt and took pictures of the vegetation with our Seek apps and, did this like kind of nerdy Sunday thing. And I just am so grateful that it all kind of encompasses time on the bike and how the bike connects me to the people I love. It connects me to my community. It, helps me get from point A to point B in a very practical way. So that was mine, was just this very simple, instrument that is a very deep part of my life. So.
Love that. Yay. Nice.
Yay for cycling.
Yay for cycling. So for me, I most evenings after my kids are in bed, sometimes when cat's in bed too, usually between 9:45 and 10:15, let's say, I'll take my dog out for a walk. And sometimes I'll listen to music. Sometimes I'll talk to a friend. Sometimes I have no headphones and I just, am out there just enjoying the evening because it's pitch black by then, right? For the most part, nobody's outside. And I just had one of these moments where just everything kind of synced up. I had like that synchronicity, I was listening to music, song I'd never heard before came on, but like just set this perfect tone. There was this like thunderstorm in the distance, right? I could see like lightning cracking and then like 8 seconds later, hear the low rumbling. So it wasn't close. I wasn't going to get rained on. It was beautiful out, just enjoying my walking my dog. And it was just this moment of There's some I do most nights, and it's fine. It's whatever, most nights it's nice little exercise. Dog feels better when you get back. But it was just this moment of, I don't know, like a block and a half of just this really present, mindful moment. And I was just really in that moment, and just everything was perfect. It was just awesome. These lightning strikes and this music and my dog being obedient for that stretch. Yeah, it was great. Yeah. Nice little moment.
A moment of perfection. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have a dog one too. I've been way focused on it. So we got a new dog a few months ago. So 8-month-old blue heeler, and then we have an older red heeler. So I call them, the two terrorists, because they're super smart and the tons and tons of energy. But over the last likely month, but I feel it almost daily sometimes now, training him, is I used to approach training the dog of like, this thing I wanted to get done, I got to do this. And then we can go and enjoy the walk after the training. Mm-hmm. But now I've realized, like, I don't know how we have a trainer that's kind of helping him, but that like all the interactions are training. And it's funny because I've always said this is like to people, every time you have an interaction with another human being, you're training how to respond to you, how to respond to. And as I started making that shift with the dogs, I've just really noticed that, and it's weird for me to say this because I grew up with outside dogs, farm kind of utility, but even in the utility dogs, I think people have this experience where the relationship is changing, that it's not, that the approach has been less, why don't you do this? And frustrated, when are you going to learn to do this? Like, hey, bud, you want to do this? Hey, but like the interaction and what's been really cool is as my perspective on that shifts and my frame on that shifts, just how the dogs are responding to me has just turned. My wife is like, oh, they like you better now. And there's some downsides of like, they literally sleep on me. Like if I sit on the couch, they want to be on me. I'm like, okay, we got some boundaries in the relationship here, folks. But it's just been really like my frustration level goes down. My expectation changes. And I'm finding that I really love training those two. Like because I can see when they learn something, they get excited and I get excited. And that used to be a chore. And now it's like, I can't go have a beer because I'm training my dogs. And people are like, what? Yeah.
I love it.
Those dogs pick up on that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So do humans. Yeah, see, it's training you to be a better human too.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us again, Brian.
Thanks, man.
Thank you for having me. Great.
Yeah, this was
super great.
Love these conversations. So we will link in the show notes how you can find Brian on social media and his website. And as always, thank you to our listeners. And we look forward to, hearing from you all on the flip side.